Looks like we're live.
Are we live?
We're
Okay.
live.
Wow.
Happy Friday.
Yeah.
Tim, how are you today?
I'm having a good day and a good week. How about you, Junior? What's happening?
It's been pretty back to back this week. It's been a little bit of a crazy week, but I'm excited to be here. Friday. It's good. Been a good morning. So
Yeah.
for everyone watching that's jumped on so far, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Happy Friday. Maybe happy Saturday for some of you. It's wonderful to be with you. The reason for the stream today, we just wanted to hop on and go live for a few minutes and talk about Tim's new article that came out a little bit earlier this week. Tim, when did it come out? Tuesday?
Monday.
Monday on Forbes.
On Forbes.
So we're going to talk just a little bit about that. I thought it would be a cool opportunity to, in addition to reading the article, just go between the lines, get some backstory. Why did we write this article? Why do we think that it's interesting? And Tim, kind of a insight into your mind regarding some of these. So you'll see down below the title of that article, The Accelerating Transformation of Employee Mental Health and Safety. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go over to the article. And I want to show you a picture that shows up in the article that I think is pretty interesting. And this kind of threw me. It threw me the first time I saw it. I'm like, what is this? So if any of you are here in the chat, go ahead and take a guess as to what this picture is. What's happening in this picture? Because I alone, man, without the article, I couldn't tell. So I'm interested to see if any of you can.
It is amazing. And you know what? I was shocked that I could find an image to capture what we're going on here.
I know. So Tim, go ahead and describe to us what's happening in this picture.
Right. So I begin the article by helping people understand that back in 1788, the British Parliament passed the Chimney Sweepers Act. Way back during the first Industrial Revolution, and the reason they passed this law was because chimney sweepers were conscripting boys as young as 4 years old to go work.
That's
with
crazy.
Chimney sweeps. So think about it: dangerous working conditions, long working hours, and we're talking boys as young as 4 years old. And the Parliament said, "Time out. We can't do that."
So that's what's going on here.
What's going on here? Take a look. See
So
that sweep?
Chimney sweep here.
He's looking at the little boy.
Okay.
That's what's going on. Like, you need to come and work for me.
It's unbelievable that actually happened.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super interesting. So you'll go ahead and see the title, The Accelerating Transformation of Employee Mental Health and Safety. So we'll just go kind of section by section today and talk about this particular article, why it was written. So as Tim mentioned, 1788, British Parliament passed the Chimney Sweepers Act. And Tim, tell us, what does duty of care mean?
The duty of care is the concept that came into being as we were addressing safety. The duty of care is the obligation and the responsibility that the employer has to the employee. There's a moral, ethical responsibility, and we call that the duty of care. And so this article is really all about the evolution of that concept. So maybe before the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have that concept, really. At least we didn't have a shared conception of a duty of care. And then it came into being, and then it became incorporated into laws, right? Well, this article is the story of what has happened since 1788.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. So I like this sentence here: the convulsions of 2020 marked the beginning of an accelerating transformation. This is something that we saw throughout 2020, particularly the last half, and something that we continue to see today. Convulsions of 2020 is a great way to put it. So I'll go ahead and take just this next section because I have particular interest in this. We've moved from an agrarian to an industrial to a service and finally to an experience economy. And we are not all the way there. It's interesting because with each of these developments moving from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, we still keep 1 when we have 2.
Yeah.
And we still keep 1 and 2 when we move to 3. And we keep 1, 2, and 3 when we move to 4.
Yeah.
And there are certain pieces of the markets that can move all the way over to experience economy. We will always have agriculture, we will always have industry, and will always have service. But it's particularly those service businesses that are moving increasingly into number 4, the experience economy. It's how they're increasingly differentiating their offerings. And I think that that's fascinating, especially when we start talking about some of these concepts. So, Tim, for those who don't know, you have a background in operations, right? So you came from academia and you moved very quickly into not academia.
That's true. Very unusual.
So where did you go? Where did you go after Oxford?
I went into the steel industry and I served as a plant manager for a fully integrated steel plant, the last fully integrated steel plant west of the Mississippi. And I was the plant manager for 5 years. And this was a sprawling 700-acre industrial environment, a megaton realm that was very, very dangerous. And so safety was something that we preached as a religion. And so I learned safety the traditional way. So the original conception of safety was what? It's physical.
Very physical.
Physical safety. Don't get injured. Don't get hurt. Don't die.
Yeah.
And so from the very beginning, we developed this rubric, this framework with which to think about physical safety. And we have identified over the years 4 primary safety or hazard areas. So physical, biological, chemical, and ergonomic. And so for years and years and years, safety has been about these 4 hazard categories for 250 years.
Yeah.
Right?
So for those of you just joining us, we're talking about the duty of care that really came about in the 18th century, probably fair to say.
Yeah.
That employers are coming up against this idea that they're responsible in some measure for the health and safety of their employees. And that translated all the way through to Tim's experience at the steel mill, where he's in charge of a very large workforce over a large physical area, bumping up into these categories of safety in a very real way, because the downside risk of that environment is literally fatal.
Yeah.
And so you saw that up close and personal. I thought this chart was interesting. Incident rates of non-fatal occupational injuries and illnesses, private industry, 1972 to 2018. I wonder what this chart would look like if we took it back 100 years. It would be even steeper, right?
Yeah, it would. And those statistics come right from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it just shows the incredible progress that we have made in the realm of physical safety.
Yeah.
Right?
And we'll never be absolved of that responsibility of physical safety, right?
Yeah.
That's always going to be there.
Yeah, nothing less than 0 is ever acceptable when it comes to injury or accident.
Yep. Okay, so we've got those 4 hazard categories. Now, the real crux of the article, why this article exists, is this paragraph right here. It's only been in recent years that we have begun to reconceive employee health and safety as an integrative concept that includes both physical and psychological domains. Keyword, psychological. We've adopted a 5th hazard category, psychosocial. This is interesting. This is new. This is just as new to us in 2021 as the duty of care idea was in 1788. And it's taken us 250 years almost to get to this point. So Tim, help us understand what psychosocial risk is.
Psychosocial risk means we're talking about anything that would threaten an employee's mental, emotional, or psychological health. So let's talk about some examples. So if you'll, to the bottom of this paragraph, we're talking about things such as excessive work hours, workloads, poor leadership, culture, bullying, harassment, role clarity, involvement in decisions, things like that, that have they can have an adverse effect on us emotionally, mentally, or psychologically.
And this was really made even more acute by the pandemic, right?
Well,
a lot of people are feeling that. And I think employers around the world are feeling that. This is not just a domestic issue. This is global. This is international. And the trend of safety is also not just localized. We're talking about this at a global scale.
Yeah, it really blew up in 2020. So Junior, we live out west, and think about what we had. We had the pandemic. And then layered on top of the pandemic, we had an eruption in racial tension.
Yep.
Then if that were not enough, we had wildfires just going on everywhere throughout the West for a big portion of the year. And it was a pretty scary, frightening experience, one thing after another. And all of this heightened our awareness of the need for psychological safety and addressing psychosocial hazards.
Yeah.
That's really what it did.
So organizations have a duty of care to their employees. That includes physical safety. This fifth category, psychosocial safety, is something that we are also responsible to provide. So one of the interesting things that is happening is we're seeing evolving laws, regulations, and standards related to this psychosocial category of safety that we have never seen before. And these are all, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, brand new. And they're only in their infancy. And so, Tim, help us understand at a high level, what are some of the things going on in this regulatory space regarding psychosocial safety?
What I thought I would do in the article, Junior, is just highlight the ones that I think are most important.
Yeah.
And really the ones that are leading the charge. And so right off the bat, you have to go to Australia. Australia passed their Model Work Health and Safety Act back in 2011. But since then, they've continued to add amendment after amendment after amendment. Now, the way that it works in Australia is if you're a state or a territory, you still have to pass those amendments in your local jurisdiction, right, to make those binding. But that's what's going on in Australia.
Interesting.
The second big effort would be Canada.
Yep.
And Canada passed a national standard related to psychological safety back in 2013. And they keep building on it. Now, at this point, it's a voluntary standard, right? It's a non-binding standard. The point is, though, if you read in the article, 21% of Canadian workers are experiencing some kind of mental health issue. And so think about that. Think about the costs associated with that, both economic and non-economic costs. So that's the second big effort that we need to point to in the world, that national non-binding standard that Canada has in place.
Well, and I think at a provincial level, they're even moving further with some of the regulations, and they're becoming mandatory.
That's true.
It's really interesting to see that trend. And the statistic that you cite in the article about Canadians suffering from mental health problems, I've seen some really interesting data coming from Asia, North America. I've seen an Indian statistic that is also very interesting. And so we as people, as humanity on the planet Earth, we are all experiencing this. And we are seeing heightened levels of stress and of mental illnesses. That's reported broadly. So this is not just an isolated incident in one given country. This is happening everywhere. And I think a lot of us are feeling that. I know I felt that certainly last year. There was a lot more uncertainty, regardless of what was happening, inside the home. There was so much outside that was, affecting the way that I looked at the world, and all of the things going on with not just business, but with family and friends and relatives. I think it's really fascinating to look at it.
Let me point this out too, Junior. If you go back to the Canadian standard identifies 13 psychosocial factors.
Yep.
So if you're in an organization and you're trying to figure out how to take the next step, the Canadian standard is very helpful as a framework. Yeah. Because they've done a good job in identifying these 13 psychosocial factors. So just in case you need a little bit of help there, it's a really good resource.
Then we've got this ISO regulation. This is interesting. It's in draft form still, looking to be published in summer of this year. I would highly recommend that those of you that are interested in the regulation happening in this psychosocial safety category, go look into this. It's really interesting. So we make reference to it here. Tim talks about it in the article. And now I want to focus on the last couple paragraphs here, and I want to read just a couple sentences. The crises of 2020 exposed our weaknesses in preparation and commitment to address the mental and emotional health of employees. but they are also serving as an accelerator to transform workplaces into sanctuaries of psychological safety. And again, global phenomenon. This is happening everywhere. The effects of the pandemic, the effects of racial tension, those things are felt broadly, and we're experiencing those as a human race. And so we're in this together, and organizations are now working and moving in this direction because they realize the responsibility that they have, that we have for each other, this duty of care that extends past physical safety. We will never absolve ourselves of that physical safety component, but this psychosocial component, it is not going away. This is not flavor of the week. This is not a fad. This is here to stay. And I think that in 2300, they will look back as we do at 1788 and say, well, yeah, of course you're not going to conscript a 4-year-old chimney sweeper. They'll probably look at us and say, well, yeah, like, how were you oblivious to this for 250 years? And so I think that we are in the infancy of what this will become. And so any effort we make to improve in this area, to improve our individual skills as professionals, to improve our collective skills as organizations and as teams, all of those will reap heavy benefit, because we're talking about humans. Organizations are made up of humans. Every innovation is product of humans. And the better we interact with each other, the more effective we are. The more psychological safety that exists in the environment, the more productive we will be as a human race, the more happy we will be and fulfilled. And I think we'll do a much better job at fulfilling that duty of care if we look at it, we acknowledge it, and we attempt to make a difference, right?
Yeah, it's really true.
Tim, what else do you have to say before we close out this little live?
Well, I think what organizations are doing based on 2020 is they're conducting an examination of conscience, and they're asking themselves, how well are we performing our duty of care to all of our employees? Yeah. Because 2020 exposed our weaknesses, right? It exposed our weaknesses.
Sure did.
And so they're taking stock, they're looking at the current state, and they're saying, here we are, but this is where we need to go. And we really understand that employee mental health and safety is an integrative concept. It's both physical and psychosocial. So let's approach it holistically, and let's look at our gaps and where we need to make some improvements. And that's a beautiful thing, because organizations across the board are doing that. And that's the purpose of this article, is to tell the story and help motivate organizations to take the next step.
Yep. Yeah. This is probably one of my favorite sentences here. We've consolidated our understanding of employee safety. Now it is the time to consolidate our commitment to it. So join us in being committed to this concept. It's something that we are wholeheartedly committed to, and we're doing our best to get this information out into the world. So if you've joined us for today's live session and you've liked it so far, go ahead and give us a like on the stream. Follow Leader Factor. We are at the cutting edge of what is happening in psychological safety, in the category of psychosocial safety, emotional intelligence. So if you're interested in those things and the duty of care that we as employers and organizations have to our employees and to each other as professionals, follow us. Make sure that you see what we've got going on.
Junior, we probably also need to mention the webinar that we have coming up.
Yeah, let's do it. So the webinar, we host webinars about once a month. We've got a really, really interesting one coming up: how to fix a toxic culture. That is a golden question that we ask ourselves and that we are asked all the time. So Tim, give us a little preview. Give us a little flavor for what that's going to be.
Well, a toxic culture is a culture that has become destructive. It's a culture in which people are now engaging in immoral and unethical behavior. And it's destructive to individuals. And in some cases, it puts the very viability of the organization at risk. How do you fix that? That's what we're going to wrestle with in this next webinar. I think you'll find it fascinating.
Excellent. So you'll be able to find a registration link for that in the chat, and also on our website, leaderfactor.com. We'll be posting a lot about that webinar, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who have hung around, for those of you that are watching this after this goes up, hello to you too, and thanks for engaging. If there's anything that we can do for you, feel free to reach out to us, leaderfactor.com. With that, have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.